So in all this that is happening, we find a young boy called Francois Duvalier is born in 1907. Grows up in a poor family, poor background, studies very hard and goes to University of Haiti and graduates in 1934, just in time when the United States Marines were leaving Haiti. This young man didn't have political ambitions. This young man wanted to serve his people and population. So what he did in the 1940s, after graduation, serving as a doctor for a while, 1940s he got training from the United States of America, and since the US was trying to fund a medical expedition in Haiti, in the South American island, against a disease that had happened, that was affecting children and killing them, resembles measles, but it's called yours. People didn't have cures for it, and the voodoo men and the medicine men in Haiti, called Ungas, decided that this disease is mostly a curse and can't be healed, and the people that appear with it are destined for death. Francois Duvalier took up the challenge and was one of the first doctors who went around the whole of Haiti. So in the 1940s, he spent his time moving around the country, meeting people village to village, meeting the medicine men consequentially, because the medicine men were the religious leaders and medicine men who were helping the people, and they were unable to treat this disease. They were considered at the higher echelons of the society in Haiti. So now, here comes a doctor who is learned, who respects them, who understands them, who is black like them, who has grown with them, treats them and gives them medicine that helps the children and cures this disease. So they named him and christened him Papa Doc. So he became famous across the whole country. He became the most notable, the most influential doctor at that time. In 1948, around that time, around the late 40s, he was selected as a Secretary of Public Health and Labor under President Estime's government. He only served for a short time before President Estime was overthrown in yet another military coup by a guy called Paul E. Magloire. So President Magloire now took over and threw out Francois Duvalier. Let's follow Francois Duvalier's life. After the coup, Francois Duvalier went to the bushes. The government that was there, people who were serving in the government, the most notable people were killed off by the military junta, and so he had to run away and hide. What he did, he went to the villages, hid there, and interacted with the people, interacted with the masses, interacted with the medicine men that he had left, and learned their cultures and steeped himself in it. That is when people say, or it is said, that he got a brilliant idea of how to take over the government. He had no interest in politics before that, as was written and known widely. He just wanted to serve his people, but he had discovered that the world is unfair and they had lost hope. You can call this a moment of clear vision, as they call it. It's a way of you have discovered something, you've discovered a truth. It's a truism that you've discovered. You just bumped into it and it hit you hard. So we see Francois Duvalier now, when he's in the bushes, when he's in hiding, he forms a great idea, a genius idea of coming back and taking over power for himself. So what he did, he came and joined a movement that was popularly known as anti-Magloire movement. This anti-Magloire movement had lasted since the overthrowing in 1950s all the way to 56, 57, about that time, where they had the first election after the military ruling, in which, because of his popularity, Francois Duvalier won with 70% of the election votes, valid election votes. I don't know how well they counted them, but he won. So he took over the government in 1956, and the guy became the president. He acted very peacefully. The military was confident that this is a good guy because now they need a civilian leader, and he was a civilian leader. He was patient. He had no history of killing people, so they didn't fear him. They didn't think he's too strong, too powerful. That's another parallel that they have in Kenya, because they have with Kenya, because in Kenya also is Moi, when Moi took over, the guys, the powers that be decided that that is a safe bet to be president, because he has no history of theft, he has no history of killing, he has no desire for power, he has no, he is not so influential that he would rule with an iron fist, and there was no fear. So Duvalier sneaked past every person's conscience and joined the government at that time. Once he joined the government, he'll become leader of the government, put his people in there, especially his number 2, called Clément Barbeau, or Babort. Oh, these French names are weird. Anyway, so he became president, he took over the government and started instituting his own schemes. Now, what happened next is a tale for the ages. What happened next is one of the most genius things that a most sadistic and deadly human being has ever done on a group of people ever in the world. It's one of the most depraved things that has ever happened. Francois Duvalier turned on his people like they have never seen before. Francois Duvalier became a beast, a monster, a killer. He tortured and ripped that country like nothing else. Remember, he had seen the power of the United States of America during his their medical, let's say charity in Haiti. He had known that this is a power to reckon with. He made them his friends. He pulled them close. What he has done for that country cannot be forgotten. 2 weeks hadn't passed since he became president that he decided to jail all his political opponents. They even thought it was a joke, and he jailed them, and some were killed when they were jailed. 2 weeks into his power. After that, he decided to eradicate the people that were opposing him, political parties that were opposing him, and he decided to form his own militia. He was helped, of course, by his right-hand man called Clement in English, Clément Barbeau. Clément Barbeau decided to help him to form an elite squad of police. How can I say it? Very, very ingeniously, Clément went around the prisons in Haiti and took the guys in death row, made them a deal they could not refuse, a deal to release them from prison and release them from all the obligations of, staying in prisons for life. They were taken, given arms, and they were to obey the president and only the president. They became a parallel force to the army. They became a parallel force to the police force, because Duvalier had discovered that the only thing that can get him out of power was the army. So the only way is to make his own personal army. This personal army was to be his own. He was to be their own chief, commander-in-chief, that is unelected, that is, and procedural and constitutional and everything. And remember, he was still, being supported by the United States of America, because this is the height of the Cold War. So America is just supporting people who are supporting them, because if they do not, then he'll be supported by the Russians, and they're very close to America, and they would put a nuclear weapon in their base, and that would be in firing range of America, so they let him be. America supported him so many times that around 1959 he had a heart attack. A crazy one. People thought he was going to die. He was supposed to die, but thanks to Uncle Sam's medical interventions, they took him, flew him, gave him the best medical attention that money could buy at the time, and took him back to Haiti as a grown man, as a healthy, upstanding citizen. Clément Barbeau helped Duvalier set a parallel security unit called the Tonton. They were called the Tonton Macoutes. Tonton Macoutes were dressing in a similar way, dressing with shades and flowery shirts, sometimes in suits. They were to be feared. They used to go around there and attack anyone at will. They were allowed to take bribes and to take any kind of wealth that they would get from the people. They would go out there and harass people haphazardly without any structure. They didn't have to be given orders about who to attack. So now they decided to attack people whichever way they wanted. So it kept the people in fear. Anyone and everyone could be attacked anywhere at moment's say. Francois Duvalier assumed a personality, a cultic personality, that everyone feared. He designed himself into an emissary of death. He designed himself as an angel of death. He designed himself after an old Haitian folktale called Baron Samedi. This Baron Samedi was meant, or was said, or was believed to be ruling the undead. Could take, the dead and raise them up to life. He would, eat the souls of people and children and all that. So now, Francois Duvalier designed himself to look like that, designed himself to be feared like that, that people feared him. People thought he had mystical powers. He would kill people, take their skulls, drink from them. He would take people's hearts. He would gouge people's eyes out. So people feared him relentlessly, freely. They feared him so much that none of them could attack him personally. Even if he was unarmed, even if he was unprotected, the Tonton Makuts feared him so much that they obeyed every word he had to say. At some point in Haiti, people were so poor that they were going to the ocean, the beaches, and paying top dollar to the boats for them to be sneaked out of Haiti and sneak out and go to any other island apart from that one. So many Haitians ran away to go to Barbados. Many Haitians found ways to get to America. Even today, they're in America. One of the biggest slums in America, New York, is from Haiti. Is full of Haitians, and they have been there for so long that the Americans can't even kick them out. So very, very bad tale. The Haitian story is one to be learned from. He got an attack, 1959, came back, and then became paranoid and said his friend is trying to overthrow him. So he abducted, it was said that, Clement Gbagbo, the guy who had helped him set up all these structures, was abducted and disappeared and died. In 1960, there was an election that was happening, and that is the first election ever where a president ran alone. No one opposed him, everyone feared, and he got 100% of all the votes that were cast. He got 100% of all the votes. 100% of all the votes that were cast were in his favor. It is ludicrous, but it happened and it was allowed. But by this time, he had been, his physical health had been so degraded because he had diabetes for a long time, and he had cases of heart attack, mild and heavy, especially in 1959, the heavy one, such that he looked way, way older than his actual age. He was in the 60s, but he had looked way, way older. Actually, he had not gotten to 60 yet, but he looked way older than his actual age. People feared him because they even thought he had come up from the dead. He had been raised from the dead. You know how someone can be very, very slim and look very, very old, and you may think this guy maybe had died and then had reincarnated? That's how. So these guys feared him. But his health, at least for the better part, I would say, helped the guys in Haiti. The guys in Haiti at least got help. But he continued his rule for another 10 years. In 1971, when he died. He died in April 1971, but months before he died, in February 1971, he had appointed his son, Jean-Claude Duvalier, who was called popularly Baby Doc. He had appointed him as president. He had said, this is my successor, and people actually, voted for the guy. And subsequent regimes decided to follow suit from their, the greatest dictator that the, Central American countries had ever seen. Actually, he is one of the worst dictators that any black country in this world had ever seen in the recent past. That guy was one of the worst dictators ever. Don't count the likes of Joseph Stalin. because he was an emperor of the Russian, empire. But just any country that has Africa, I would be missed to pick another country that could top that. So I wonder if the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Defense, you know, the cabinet, the president, I wonder if they know the history of Haiti in such details that they will be strategic in what they do or what they decide to do in Haiti. Because what has happened is that the same structure of Tonton Makuts that was there during Duvalier's time still persisted. The gangs grew. The governments that came after that, Baby Dog continued the same structure the father had started in the governments. He had his own groups, his own thugs that were reporting to him, and they were going around sacking everyone. The other president that came into power and did the same. They had a stranglehold on the power because they had unconstitutional ways of maintaining power. So I really, really wonder if the government has taken that in consideration. In the recent past, what happened is there's a president called Jean-Bertrand Aristide. Jean-Bertrand Aristide in 2004 was overthrown by gangs, essentially. One of the biggest gangs at the time, led by a guy called Amiot Metayer. Yeah, Amiot Metayer, maybe the French will pronounce. This guy was killed, was cut, his heart was cut out, and his eyes gouged out. Clearly, there was a machete, not a gun. A machete did all that work. His brother, Buter Metayer, decided that his brother's Amiot now, his brother's death cannot go unanswered. And he declared publicly to everyone, word was spread around the whole country, Haiti, knew that this guy has declared that the person who was responsible for his brother's death will not live. So the gangs started building its power and kicking the government, police. It was uncontrollable. Later on, they took a country, one of the fourth largest, one of the country's biggest cities, the fourth largest city. They took it over and became their own. The country became ungovernable. They pushed up to the presidency. The president had to be evacuated from that country. I think he bounced into Congo. Then now he went to South Africa, and that's why he sought asylum and stayed. Later on, the Chief Justice, the equivalent of a Chief Justice, became president. Chief Justice, Senior Chief Justice Boniface Alexander or something became president, is now president, who called the UN, asked them for help, sent troops there, and the Americans consequently came there. So this is my take. After a long story, this is my take. I wonder whether the government of Kenya really, really has internalized the history of Haiti. This information is publicly available, so I would assume that being a government that seeks to go to another country and create peace, I really, really hope that they sat down, did more research, got intelligence reports, knew who was responsible where, because we all can see the invisible arm of Americans and French interests and businesses in Haiti. We can all see them, and we don't know whether the government sees them and acknowledges them. And before we go there, we should take time to look at ourselves and see where we come from, where we are, and where we need to go. We need to stand firm for our own people. But of course, I'm very, very hopeful that countries in Africa, countries in the African Union can send troops all the way to another continent, even if they are islands, and create peace there. If they're successful, then I will celebrate. But I really, really, really want to know if the government has really employed the thoughts and the history and the researches that have been done in such continents, in such places, by competent anthropologists. A friend of mine who's an anthropologist once told me that in Kenya, guys who studied anthropology. Anthropology is the study of human history, the culture, the language, the movement, behaviors, everything. What makes us us, basically, and everything about us. She told me that there are not so many places that an anthropologist can get employment in Kenya. In Africa, actually, courses like that are not, because these courses are supposed to be strategic. They are supposed to be employed by guys who are making policy, who are making rules, who are becoming, political leaders, religious leaders, so that when someone goes out there and starts preaching to people to give them 10 shillings, or someone is going to parliament to say that, we want the guys who have been implicated in corruption, or they have cases pending of corruption, should be allowed to hold public office. Those people should be advised by an anthropologist. Should be, their ideas, their positions should be used strategically to make changes, to enforce changes, to make a better life. And we can only move forward looking back. That is why I started this channel, because history has to be told. You have to understand what relations we have with the countries that we're going to attack, or we're going to work with, or we're going to assist. Parallels that are between Kenya and Haiti. Yes, we are black. Yes, we have gangs in our country. Yes, they seem as if they have gotten out of our hands. Yes, one of the biggest presidents to destroy the country was considered very harmless, but he became very consequential, and the gangs are running the country. Even a corruption scheme, one of the biggest that has happened in that region, was called Duvalier-Ville. He wanted to make his own city. Of course, he stole all the money. But, well, that's a story for another day. I can only hope that that these words impact you heavily, such that you will push your elected members to be better, to make better decisions, to make better, movements towards a saner country, a saner continent, a saner world. I don't know much. Patriot 254, I hope this is impactful.